a little while, you find your footing, and then you go in one or the other direction, depending on what your likes and dislikes are. So I think that's where, we've seen that, in the beginning we were collecting for some reason, but later on when we become serious about collecting, that's when the direction.
That's when the direction comes.
Right.
Interesting.
I think they're different kind of collectors. Some of them are very whimsical. They're not even looking at the value, the long-term value of art. They're just collecting. And, and some of the art, as I was discussing with Zishan, that you outgrow it and you want to put it in the, the furthest end of your, storage. And we all have those kind of works. And then some of them you live with for very long,
right,
and then pass them on to the next generation. I think different things happen. It's very, very personal.
right.
Yeah.
I just wanted to say it's 5:58, so we're live right now, but we're just going to wait for 2 more minutes until we start, and it's 6 p.m.
Oh, good. We're on time.
Right. I'm glad that you're recording it, because here it's 8 o'clock in the morning. So there's probably a lot of folks who'll be happy to go back and watch your recording
Later, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, how life has changed thanks to COVID. I mean, from all of us getting together, and we've all learned to do this kind of thing.
But it's good, otherwise we never have this group of people together. It's
Well, that's
on a regular day, so it's good in a way.
Yeah. True.
Today, I have to tell you before we start, today I signed a lease for my new gallery.
Wonderful, Mubarak.
Congratulations.
Buff, you have to come and see it now.
I will. Is this in Islamabad?
Yep.
Fantastic. Then maybe I'll make a trip up.
Please do that.
I'd love to.
Okay, so it's 6 p.m. So should we begin now?
I think it all depends on your team. What are they saying? How many people have come in?
We have 18 people on. We have a total of 25 people on right now. So
I think we can start then. Don't you think so? Should we? Should we commence? Okay.
Yeah, sure.
With us.
sure. Do you want to wait 1 more minute? Okay. Let's start. Okay. Good evening, Assalamu alaikum, and welcome everyone. I'm Zahra Hamdani Mirza, and welcome to A Passion Mirrored, Unpacking the Relationship Between the Creator and the Collector. This is the first in a series of curated discussions, part of a celebration we're having for an extraordinary book launching very soon, A Beautiful Despair, The Art and Life of Meher Afroz, edited by Nilüfer Farooq, which is a collection of texts on Meher Afroz, one of the most significant artists of Pakistan. Her art explores issues of decolonization through the lost cultural architecture of language, literature, and iconography. Her practice spans vital periods of Pakistan's art history, from the peak of modernism in the 1970s to the 1980s, where Meher was a part of the wave of women artists who dominated the art practice, the art scene. Despite being culturally specific, Meher's work manages to penetrate and speak to a global audience the way only art of substance can. And I'm going to jump right in and introduce our panel. We have some very special people with us. Thank you for being here. First up, our moderators, Saqib Hanif and Nilüfer Farooq. Welcome. Saqib Hanif is the former editor of Herald. He's written extensively on art, and he hosted Framed, which is a 24-episode talk show on Dawn News, which was about Pakistani art. So welcome. And Nilüfer Farooq, of course, editor of A Beautiful Despair. She's a critic, curator, and writer. She served on the board of the International Art Critics Association, ICA, as vice president. She's one of the founders of the Karachi Biennale Trust. She established Karachi Biennale and currently serves as its managing trustee and CEO. Also joining us bright and early, Shireen and Afzal Ahmed, joining us from Chicago. They are the founders of the South Asia Institute Chicago, one of the most significant South Asian art collections in North America on public display. It's called the Hundal Collection, named after their family. So welcome, wonderful to have you. Zishan Afzal Khan, who is a curator and founder of Khas Art Gallery in Islamabad. She is also an avid art collector and also part of the team that introduced Islamabad to Meher Afroz. Also with us is the Zora Hussain, joining us from Karachi, founder of Chokandi Art Gallery, the oldest, longest running gallery in Pakistan after Indus Gallery. She's also a very significant figure, a very important figure in Pakistan's art scene. And also joining us very bright and early is Faranaz Isfahani, from DC. She's in DC, writer and senior fellow at the Religious Freedom Institute, and is second generation collector of Meher Afroz. And she inherited this passion from her mother, Akhtar Isfahani. So I'm going to jump right in, but I just wanted to say that you can see on your screen, there is a Q&A button. So feel free to type in any questions. We're going to try to get to them and try to answer them in the last 5 minutes. So let's begin. This is going to be fun. And over to our moderators. Over to you, Niloufar.
Thank you, Zehra, and welcome everyone again. Just to kind of give a little context regarding why I wrote the book or put it together with 15 contributors, is primarily because I think Meher's surfaces, forms, and palette have been so seductive, but often the conceptual complexity of her work has been, under discussed. So I felt that it was very important to bring in some important voices to talk about those layers that have sedimented in her work. And the book will be available next month, and I hope everyone will get to read it, and particularly collectors and those interested in Meher's work. And regarding today's topic, I think this intrinsic link between the collector and the artist, through art has always been there. We've had patrons of art, and I remember reading a very interesting correspondence between the great, Ustad Chughtai and a member of the royal family who was his patron. And this correspondence was from almost a century ago and gave you insight into how commissions came about at that time. But with the advent of modernism in Pakistan, we had giants like Ali Imam stepping in to, inculcate this passion for modern art. And he got a group of people together that were collecting classical painting, artifacts, and antiques. And then he communicated, his own knowledge and passion for modern art. And his Sunday afternoons that brought poets together along with artists, collectors, and writers became very special. And, fiery debates took place and a lot of exchange. And from those gatherings have come some of the most important art collections of modern art, in Pakistan. And I still see that he's influenced so many people and mentored a good number of us. The Indus Gallery, that is Imam Saab's gallery, was Meher's first gallery. Yeah, he paid her this incredible compliment by saying that she was a painter's painter. And what higher compliment can there be than to be admired by your own peers? And he also mentored me. And when I began to write, he encouraged me. And, I think if he was here today, he would have, had a lot to say about what was missing in that book, as well as, acknowledging a lot of, debt that we owe to him. So I think the whole idea of the artist, the collector, is very important, of course, but often it's overshadowed by a heavily mediated art market of art auctions, dealers, and art fairs sometimes that make it rather impersonal. And so the onus is now on really the collector to seek out the connection, you know, and to discover more about the art that they collect. So I think today's topic is bound to interest a lot of people that are already collecting, as well as artists who maybe would like to connect with people that you know, acquire their work. So I'd like to now sort of invite Saqib for his remarks. Saqib comes from a different generation. He did not interact with Ali Imam, but he had another mentor in Zohra Hussain. So Saqib, over to you.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Is Afroz on board? Nilofer? Meher Afroz hai?
Yeah, Meher is in the audience, yes.
Okay, बहुत मुबारक मेहर इस किताब के बारे में, and congratulations to you, Nilofer. You stuck it out with this book. I remember the first time you asked me to do an essay, which I subsequently never did. It was about 3 years ago. And बहुत मुबारक. My relationship, I say relationship rather than knowledge of Meher's work, because I've always sought Meher out whenever I had been interested in her work. So it developed like as a very special relationship. I was introduced to Meher as I was introduced to every artist by Mrs. Hussain. मैं उनको जोरा आपा कहने की हिम्मत नहीं करूंगा क्योंकि वो हम सबकी बड़ी हैं. Meher is one person. I have a very small collection of art, but it's a collection that I have never regretted to have. It's a collection that I've gone back to over and over again, and even now when I have my chai in the morning, I interact with those paintings at a fairly significant level. With Meher, the thing has been that her surfaces, her textures is the first thing that drew me to her work. But as I grew to see a lot of her other work, there was a particular aura or a persona that I identified with in terms of Meher's work. It is work that I have gone back to over and over again in my life, and I've always found it becoming richer and richer over the last, I've seen her work over the last 32 years. And it's not the kind of work that you are likely to forget. And it's not the kind of experience of looking at her work that is something that one tends to forget again. I think in Meher we have a great artist, one of the greatest women painters in Pakistan, historically and at the moment. Her work has always meant more to me. I mean, whenever I have looked at her work, I have gone back to Meher over and over again to learn something more about the work. And I find the work more convincing every time I have been to Meher. So it's a relationship that's, or maybe it's about the kind of about is in any, sort of a market oriented kind of relationship. It's a relationship that I treasure, I cherish, and I always learn from. And that's what makes Meher so special for me. As are other artists, but Meher has a special place in my heart in that way. Other than that, I think Meher is one of the most significant practitioners of, at least as far as the women are concerned and the men are concerned. But her work always strengthens my conviction in her, what should I say, in what she has to say about things. I think that's enough of an introductory comment, so maybe move further, please.
Sure, would you like to ask Zora Appa? Yeah.
Ji. So you are asking the first question, Nilufar, are you?
No,
Yeah,
you will be asking the first one. Ji.
Assalamu alaikum, Mrs. Hussain. Zora Appa is an icon in my life. I've always looked up to her. जो थोड़ा बहुत मैंने सीखा है वो मिसेस हुसैन के क्या कहूँ कदमों में सीखा है. She had a very significant presence in my life, and not only in terms of art, but in terms of humanity and in the human condition in general. I bought my first set of Meher Afrozes from Mrs. Hussain's gallery when it was in a different location. And I think I have been buying all the Meher Afroz from her, including my last one. Mrs. Hussain, आपने हम सबको बड़ा कुछ सिखाया है जिंदगी में. और you have a iconic place in art. Can you tell us something about how you cultivated a clientele or collectors of Meher's work?
देखो साकिब, ऐसा होता है कि जनरली तो a gallery has to generate money. तो हम हर किस्म का आर्ट बेचते हैं. We may not give it a prominent place or don't take those artists as our gallery artists, but just to generate money, हम उनको floor से बेचते हैं. And we know it's just to generate money because we are not funded by anybody. We have. So अगर होता है कि when we take on an artist, we really want to promote them. For that, we have to see that the artist is very committed, sincere to his work, and he's not catering to market requirements and doing serious work. So when we took on Meher, तो उनका हमारा ये काम था कि आर्टिस्ट को sort of promote करे as much as we can. तो मेहर का काम ये है कि she didn't, उसका काम एक तो ये है कि visually बहुत attractive है. You know, she builds up such rich textured work. People are very attracted to her work. दूसरे ये है कि मेहर की themes जो है, होता यह है कि when a collector comes to the gallery, they are usually buy at random. जो उनकी fancy को strike करे, वो उसको खरीद देते. It's only later on they learn, they built up a strategy. And now they are going to buy, and it takes them a long time. Then this built up a strategy that these are the artists we are going, they become much wiser. These are the artists we are going to collect, and we are just not going to buy at random. तो मेहर का ऐसा था कि एक तो मेहर के कुछ अली इमाम ने बनाए हुए थे क्लाइंट्स, जिसमें मेरे ख्याल में वहाब जाफर साहब थे, शकील सैगल थे. They have been buying her work. मेहर ने पहली जो एग्जीबिशन मेहर की हुई थी,
मैं आपसे ये पूछूंगा, was it easy to start to generate collectors for Meher's work?
हाँ, it was very easy because her work is visually very attractive. और दूसरे उसके काम में ये बात है कि she is a very skilled printmaker as well as a superb painter. And when she combines those two skills, she builds up layers of work, and by she's scratching, rubbing, layering, and all these methods, techniques that she employed, she builds, comes out with very good, rich surfaces, you know, which remind you of aging surfaces, you know, decaying, aging surfaces. And sometimes there is even patina of sort of old objects. So her surfaces are always very, very attractive. The other thing in her work is that she always uses indigenous symbols and images, and which are always at the back of our mind, like images from Gandhara, Ellora, Ajanta, even Mughal miniatures. And these things are always at the back of her mind. And she uses them in her work. And working through these layered surfaces, she builds up rich, dense textures. And her patterns and her forms are at the back of her mind. And when we see them, we know we have seen them somewhere. We have this nostalgia, and we are at once, the client is at once attracted to them. And
But wouldn't you say she started out, at least my introduction to her through your gallery, she started out with figurative work, which sort of, became more and more symbolic, more and more abstract as time went on. Did you see a difficulty in keeping up the collectors that you had tuned into her work initially?
actually, when Meher started her work, her first exhibition, I think it was in 1974 with Alima, she started with abstract work. But later on, when I think it was in 87 when she exhibited with me, mask and puppet, then she started getting figurative. Later on, again, she moved to abstract. No, I did not have any difficulty. People were usually very excited about her work because Meher never stagnated. She always remained relevant. She kept up with the time. She was always very experimental. And she always came up with new work, new methods. And that kept people always interested in her work. Like when she was very at home with installations, she put up beautiful installation. So she always, she never allowed herself to get into a rut, which each exhibition she sort of, she went from strength to strength in her work, always improving, coming out with innovations. So Meher's work always remained very relevant and very contemporary.
I completely agree with you, because every time I've visited her work, so to say, she has moved on and she has something more to say. It may be the same journey, but she takes trajectories that are quite surprising and very enriching. I tend to agree with you there. I mean, she's an artist that has, in her own quiet, very intense manner, sort of moved on every time one has seen her work, especially a body of work like her exhibitions or whatever she has shown. There's a distinct, sort of a linear movement towards something she's trying to say. I look at the first few, some मेरे ख्याल से 89 का काम है मेरे पास, कुछ puppets and masks or something like that.
Can we take Zishan into the discussion now, please? Because of our time constraints. So you can put the question to Zishan.
Please give me a shut up call. Zishan, what kind of an experience have you had in building up a collector base for Meher in Islamabad?
So I find it very interesting to listen to what you were saying, because Islamabad, of course, is, sorry Islamabad, I live here, but is light years behind Karachi in the development of collector sensitivity. So yes, I mean, I know Nilufar, you said, actually I don't think that we were the first people to have Meher's exhibition. I think it was the Rohtas Gallery in Pasha's Gallery in the 80s, early 80s. But when we had it, which was with Mubina in around in the 90s, it was figurative work, as you said. And over the years, we have shown Meher. And here we found, to begin with, that the figurative work, as Zora is saying, was very easy to sell. As she developed into a much more modernist and although her subjects are not modernist, but her treatment was modernist. I mean, if you see her last exhibition with us, which was Bahishte Gumshuda in 2014, it was the Lost Paradise. It was a very spiritual, very Islamic, very geometric, fabulous exhibition, but very different to her other ones. And so it was difficult for Meher, not for me. I mean, I thought it was a stunning exhibition, but that modernist aesthetic had not reached here yet. I hope it has now. It's been a long time, Meher, so I hope you come back to us. And I'm sure our audience is now younger and more, you know, more full of life. So yeah, it has changed. And Zora, from our perspective, Meher's work changed a lot, from her figurative to her very Islamic, geometric. And I mean, Islamic is the wrong word for it. I know she may have meant that, but you know, Meher conveys so many things in her work. It reaches out to every kind of. We are a very contemporary art gallery. We don't show. We don't really even show modernist work. We show more contemporary work, but she fits into us as well, you know. And that I find is the very interesting thing about Meher, that she fits into all these categories with such ease, because it is really what you see in Meher's work. She leaves her work open-ended, I would think. You know, I think she leaves you to interpret it. I don't know what the others think, but the interpretation she leaves to you. So you can interpret it in a religious way, in a modern way, in a whatever way you want.
Actually, the thing is, Zishan, I just wanted to make a note. The last time I saw her exhibition and I went over to her, and Meher se ye kaha ke, of course, the work was getting more and more abstract. Though more and more Muslim in its, you know, in its iconography, in its application. मैंने मेहर से कहा कि अब आपका काम उस लेवल पे है कि महसूस तो हम करते हैं, बतला नहीं सकते. And I think that is the kind of journey, at least I have had the privilege to have with Meher.
Yes. I agree with you. And I think as a gallerist, Zora, I'm sure you will agree with me, the most exciting thing is to show artists who change. Because artists who don't change and who don't change their you know, who just paint the same thing and again, they are commercial artists, you know. And of course there is a place for commerce. I'm not saying there isn't, but it is, to me, and perhaps to the collector, Shireen might want to say something about this, it is not as exciting as an artist who is constantly evolving, and Meher constantly evolves. I
Absolutely.
find.
So with that, I'm going to ask Shireen and Afzal, you know, about their collection and about their trajectory. Shireen and Afzal, you began collecting in the 1970s as a young couple. And I remember you telling me that you went to Ali Imam because that was the only gallery in town. And would you like to sort of share your memories of how Ali Imam guided you? Because one of the things that you said, and it resonated with me, was that he sent you to the artists to discover, you know, and develop a relationship, you know?
Yeah. And you're right. The first painting that we ever bought was from Ali Imam. You know, we were married and, you know, started to look for art to decorate our home. That's basically how we started. We didn't understand. We didn't even like the American art and the European art that we saw here. And on our first trip back to Karachi, we looked around for galleries, and you're right, there was none except for the Indus Gallery. And that's how we met Ali Imam. And over the years, he became a friend, and we give him credit for getting us started. I think if it wasn't for Ali Imam, we would not have this collection. And you're right, when he understood what we were looking for, and he probably directed us also to people that he felt we needed to have in our collection. We went to artists in all over Karachi. We would sometimes go visit a family. We've even visited families where the artist has passed away, And we have some works of Hanjra, for example, who we thought was a wonderful artist. And we found some unfinished works that he was painting when he passed, and we have those in our collection. But, and then in Lahore, he introduced us to Salima Hashmi. So we got to know Salima very early, and then through her, we met other artists. And we would spend long sessions with them and talk to them, and you'd end up drinking several cups of tea before you convince them to, you know, to part with a piece of their work. That there was this couple that came from the US, they knew nothing about us. And here we were trying to convince them that it was okay for them to sell us their works. I don't know if you want to say something.
Yeah, I think our trajectory starts very innocently, like Shireen said, in 1971 when we got married. And that's when we started collecting Pakistani South Asian art. The reason was not that innocent in the sense that, you know, I was living by myself. Shireen came from Pakistan and joined me. And I had a couple of paintings that were depictive of normal fall scene, you know, with beautiful colors and all that on my wall. And they were as American as you can get. And Shireen didn't like it. So I said, okay, let's throw that out and let's go take a trip to Karachi and try to find some Pakistani art. And that's where it started. And I think I used to come to Karachi to work at LRBT. At that time, the LRBT was in the formative stages with Leighton Graham. And, but later on, because Ali Imam developed some eye problems also, so he became my patient also. So the relationship was very, very close. And I think in the beginning, except for the books and magazines, we didn't have any access to knowledge about Pakistani paintings. I think once the art market in the auctions opened up and internet came into vogue, that's when we got our education, and that's where we focused on certain artists, and Meher was one of them. And I think I still remember it was about 10 years ago when Imran Mir was alive. He took us to Meher's house to look at some of the paintings to buy. And prior to that, we had bought a couple of paintings from Zora, from a Chokandi gallery about Meher. So that's where it started, and now it's grown to the point where, you know, there's not enough space in our house or offices to keep the paintings. So that's when we opened the South Asia Institute.
Yeah, I think like Charles said, it started innocently. And I think we began to realize what we were doing, I think, when our lives actually started to revolve around art shows and gallery openings, and that's, I think that's when we began to realize this is becoming a collection. This is something that we have to share with other people.
Yeah, I often tell the story that in the beginning it was just a decoration, little interest, but it became more like a passion, and then it's become a disease now. We can't get rid of this disease, incurable disease as we call it.
I think it's a wonderful disease, actually. But I like, before I go to Faradaz, I'd like to put another question to you. And that is that, you know, there are a lot of artists in Pakistan, including Meher, and particularly Meher, who have, you know, well known in their own country because of the kind of esoteric work they do. It's very rooted here and anchored, you know, in all our traditions. And the dialogue is very much about, you know, our culture. You know, how do you plan to show them there? You know, and have you ever thought about it? Because obviously there are some works that respond to the trends, the global trends. And then there are some works who are, you know, very different, and they really don't comfortably fit into any of those discourses in other parts of the world. Have you thought about that kind of?
I think you touched on an important subject, and that is that people in this part of the world know very little about our heritage, about our culture. And I think we, as a group, are to blame for that. I think we haven't said enough. We haven't promoted our art, our culture. We haven't told people who we really are, you know, who is this big group of brown people in this country. And I think that's where the South Asia Institute comes in. I think that was one of the main reasons. You know, we did want to share our collection. We've had visits, museum visits to our home and things like that. But that's a small group of people. And over the years, I think we've realized it's the common person, the general public that needs to know about us and needs to, the art brings people together. Here we are sitting, you know, thousands of miles apart. And we've seen that ourselves in our lives. Our friends all are people who are involved in the arts in one way or another. And it's a wonderful group of friends that we have. And I think there is so much interest in what we show and what we talk about. And besides the general public, there is a group of young people now who are born and brought up in this country. We have two sons, and they're fortunate that they had grandparents around, and you know there was a lot of tradition and so on growing up. But there's a younger generation now here of South Asians who know very little about their culture, who know very little about their heritage. And if we're going to instill pride in these people for who they are and what they are, I think it's through them understanding, knowing about their art, knowing about their heritage. And I hope that the South Asian Institute will provide that.
Oh, absolutely. We're looking forward to that kind of projection for our artists. Farhanaz,
can I add?
Sorry, go ahead. Sure.
I wouldn't take more than a minute. I think one of the reasons is that, you know, there are a lot of South Asians in America, but our story is not told yet. And that's where the problem comes in. I think most of the curators and the experts, so-called experts, have been European and American, and most of the mainline museums in this country, they show American or European art. South Asian art is at the lower totem pole. And in fact, when we were thinking of deciding as to what to do with our art, we contacted a lot of these mainline museums. They would want to acquire or donate, you know, us donating all the art to them. But, you know, what we wanted in return was a dedicated South Asian gallery where we could showcase some of those artists that are not known in this country. So we wanted to make sure, but they don't want to give that because that's on the lower scale. So, you know, not only that they wanted your art collection, but they wanted money on top of that to develop a dedicated South Asian gallery. So I said, if I have to give you money on top of my collection, I can do it myself. So that's where the South Asian Institute comes in. And the idea is basically to showcase some of those artists that are well known in their own countries in South Asia, but nobody even knows about that.
And emerging artists.
Yeah,
And that's
absolutely.
what we do with our exhibit. You know.
Yeah, I totally agree with you because the story has to be told by us. And that is very important because we have to be the narrators of the story, and giving it to someone else to kind of give it a voice would have not been so effective. Sorry?
It gets
now, yeah, absolutely, it gets distorted. Now, Farhanaz, Shireen just talked about a second generation of young, collectors and art enthusiasts in America who didn't get a chance to know art from Pakistan, but you were very lucky. you know, your mother, Akhtar Isfahani, who we all knew very well, and called her Akhtar Apa very affectionately and with tremendous respect. And it's unfortunate we lost her, you know, some months ago, but you know, she gave you that chance to visit exhibitions, and you know, you told me about how you were introduced to Meher's work through her passion. You need to get your sound, Farhanaz. Your sound is off. Yeah. Can you turn your mic?
Can I say one thing to in response to what comments made by Shireen?
Sure. Can we just get an answer from Farhanaz and we'll come back to it?
Sure.
Yeah, Farhanaz, yeah, good. Yeah, go ahead.
My early encounter with Meher's work was definitely through my mother's collection and her friendship with Zora Hussain and Meher Afroz. I think it was probably the late 1980s, early 90s, when Mummy took me to an exhibition of Meher's work, and I don't recollect the gallery exactly, but it could very well have been Zora Hussain's at that time. And any understanding that I have of art, and I absolutely do not consider myself an expert or an intellectual or academic in this sphere, but my mother was a great collector and often ahead of her time. She started collecting in the early 1960s, and her collection was populated with Kibriya, Sadkhans, and many masters, but also artists at that time unknown. Mummy loved to look at the work of new artists coming up. So I would say her approach was intellectual, and with Meher, like other artists whose work moved or intrigued her, she got to know her to understand what lay buried in the multiple layers. And I, as a young woman coming back from university in America, Meher's work in my unformed mind hit me with a passion, with nostalgia, with so many emotions, but most of all, just stayed in both my heart and my mind. And 25 years later, as Zora Apa will know, I'm always, always looking for Meher's work when I come to Karachi.
Mm-hmm. And, you know, other connections as well. I remember you telling me how the Salam-e-Akhir, or the final salutation, was something you discovered a connection, the one that Meher had used in one of her paintings. So, I mean, there are many layers of things that resonate with you.
Well, with me in particular, I have to say that Meher's works last installation, because I didn't have the chance to see it all in one piece, at the second Karachi Biennale, there were two pieces which resonated deeply among the entire piece, which was so outstanding and moving. But one was the one I acquired, which was my Khalu, my maternal uncle, Sayyid Moin Hassan, had written a beautiful salam, parts of which Meher included in a piece that showed at the last Karachi Biennale. And Meher, in that, connects the topic of 2019, which was water, to Aab in Farsi and Karbala. The connection between faith, loss, and water scarcity and today's Karachi resonated so powerfully with me. And Salam to Karbala and all those at Karbala were woven in a way that you didn't have to be a Shia, you didn't have to have a Lucknow UP connection, like I do through my mother, to move you deeply. And the work is so layered and so rich, like her earlier works. But you see this new element of faith, but then a contemporary message along with what is of the past in a way. And she also included I see the same multiplicity of cultural linkages with her work like the Salami-Akhir, which Meher had also included in a painting for the Biennale that was written by my grand uncle, who's a famous poet, Sayyid Ali Raza. So again, the images are riddled with the very particular Lucknow Shia Islam and its imagery and poetry, but it also would strike people who don't have to come from that particular lineage. You feel the loss and the courage coupled with the grand beauty. So, you know.
Yeah. Sorry, go ahead, go ahead.
Yeah, so all of that for me, each time I am lucky enough to acquire a piece of Meher's, because I have some very different pieces also, but I think at this stage in my life, for some reason, the loss, the cultural references, plus the modernity in that way, and also just the beauty of her craft, what moved me. But I have older pieces where you just see with Meher the layering of the different kinds of work. You know, it's just phenomenal. The drawing, the sketching, the printmaking, the painting. I mean, she really, I would not, on this, I would say, Saqib, I don't consider Meher a woman artist. I consider Meher a great artist. And I think on one point, I would perhaps say to the collectors from Chicago, who are much, much bigger collectors than I am, and have created a magnificent space for that, is that, you know, one can transfer the love of this art to Pakistani Americans, big young Pakistani Americans, not necessarily through maybe the old cultural references, but through the stunning work. And that is someone who's interested in art, does not have to necessarily understand the linkages to really appreciate.
Thank you, Farhanaz. And as usual, time is always the enemy. And, you know, we'll just take this last remark from Saqib. And then I think Zara will share some of the questions from the audience with us. Saqib, you wanted to say something to Shireen and Aswal?
Yes, I just wanted to say something in response to Shireen, that when Ali Imam sent her off to Meher Afroz, it was not a coincidence. I think Meher is one of the best commentators on her own work. And I have always found the work enriched by what she has to say. You know, there are some artists where it's better not to visit them. Let's put it that way. But Meher is not like that. And Meher, one final comment I would like to make is that if art is about putting things in the right place, Meher has certainly, the trajectory that I have seen in Meher is indeed to do that kind of work. She is, every time I've visited her, every time I've spoken to her, every time I've looked at at her new work, I've always felt that here is an artist who is literally putting things in their right place.
Absolutely.
So
Her own truth,
in that respect,
absolutely in the right place.
Yeah, in that respect, I think Meher is an unusual artist because she's very articulate. And it's a pleasure to sit down and talk with her about her work.
Bilkul, I agree with you completely.
And so Zara, over to you. Would you like to kind of share the questions so you know, the panelists can
So
maybe
we
answer
have
them?
two questions from the audience. One is, as a young art enthusiast, I was wondering if those on the panel have any advice to give to someone who is just beginning to collect art. The talk has illuminated the multifaceted appeal of Meher. What other artists are similar to her in Pakistan, or does no one quite compare? Obviously, no one compares.
Absolutely. But no, I think Meher has been a mentor to two generations of artists. We must also understand that. And she has passed on this very serious commitment to them. And there is a whole group of new artists out there who are equally serious and committed. But it's a very individual choice. So I think this person has to be out there looking and developing their own, engagement.
Can I say something in this?
Of
I
course.
have to say that having dealt, because I deal mostly with young artists, Sarah. So it's an interesting question, because somebody like Meher is very special. You find very few artists who have the humility of Meher. She talks to you. She doesn't mind if you don't know anything. I've seen her in my gallery talk to young children, talk to young people. It's not an arrogant level. Meher has no arrogance. The thing to do with fresh artists, and because of, I think, globalization, Shireen, maybe, I don't know, you would say something about this, but I find all the young artists that we deal with, a lot of them, obviously not everybody, but because their appeal is now cosmopolitan, their encouragement of a collector, as Meher's was, as all that generation, as Ali Imam Sahab. I mean, I started also with, I was a young student, I had just come back from college. I was 21 or something when he started me off. That is, I think, what our young artists have to look at. And they have to see that they are the ones who have to get the collectors interested in them, not the other way around. What do you think, Saqib? You're looking a bit...
skeptical.
No, not at all. I think Meher does a very fine job of educating the people around her, the viewership. I think so, and Zishan, I completely agree with you. I think every time I've had the privilege of meeting her, I have come out having learned something. And I think that's very important. I mean, the patience and the times that she is willing to dedicate to this.
Yeah. So to answer your panelist question, Zara, I think that if you are starting to collect art, engage with the artists. And nowadays, I think the gallery, with all due respect, is now even more important, because the artists don't have the kind of time that artists like Meher had. They don't have the kind of vicissitude of experience to give that Meher has. And so that is why I think the gallery is more important these days, to give that, what do you think, Zorapa? What do you think about that? Yes, the gallery
Actually, what you're saying is true, but I feel that young artists today are not ready to go through rigors or discipline of learning art. They want quick returns. And I feel that because of the social media, they don't need the gallery as much as they did before. That is the truth, because they are in touch with curators and with buyers abroad, and they sell it. They use the gallery for exhibiting their work and being reported in the press. But otherwise, they mostly sell the work from home, which is not a good trend, because you have to keep your work in the gallery to remain relevant. Your work has to be in the gallery, shown from the gallery, so that the gallery which is promoting you can always talk about your work, show your work. But artists today are trying to sell it on their own, which is not a good trend.
Okay.
Yeah,
What do you think?
I
What do
mean,
you think?
Can we have the second question, Zishan? Maybe we can have a discussion later. Yes, Zara,
Yeah,
what's the
we
second
actually have a couple more questions. So someone else
question? You
has
select
written-
one or two.
Yeah, so someone, so this is Adil Ali Khan from Toronto. Hello, Adil. So he is asking, I can't wait to get my hands on the book. Is there a period in Meher's journey that really stands out? And he's asking you this.
It's a very
Yes.
subjective question, actually. I think there are periods in Meher's work that are, incredibly memorable. And I think her Naqsh Par Aab had some wonderful pieces. Her Poshak series was incredible. And I'm sure each one of us here on the panel will have a, kind of series that they particularly like. So I think it's very subjective, really. Adil has to find his own kind of, body of work that resonates with him. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And one more question. Someone has asked, isn't it because we had commented that all the panelists agreed that the artist leaves her work open to interpretation and people can relate to it from different points of view and angles. So they've asked, isn't it better to have work that shows the perspective of the artist rather than leaving it to the viewer to judge, as the meaning of the work can be misinterpreted?
whoa.
I think a lot of artists don't like explaining the work. Like Zahurul Ikhla, he hated explaining his work, and he always said, "Yeah, if it pleases you, if it touches something in you, just go for it. Don't ask me to explain the work." Once he had a series, I think it was called Thorns and Roses. So I asked him, what made him start this series? And he answered in 3 small sentences. I came out of my office. I saw a rose bush which had dried up and I painted it. That's all. He said, don't ask to explain the work. And like Meher's work is usually sort of concerned with issues that face society. And I think, like Shirin Afzal said, she may not have an appeal for the European or the Western sort of audience, but I think her work is about universal human values. And she usually talking about, her focus is on the collapse of spiritual and moral values, which I think is a very universal subject. So I don't see that it doesn't have an appeal for the sort of Western audience.
I think you may have misunderstood us there. I think what we meant was that we need to introduce these works to our, to share them and introduce them. I think her message resonates with almost everybody, and especially with immigrants. You see a lot of the angst that she has experienced with her coming over from India to Pakistan. And that's something, I think that may be one of the reasons why we were so drawn to her work.
Yeah. No, I think a lot of people do express in their painting what they're painting about. Most don't. And part of the reason is that I think there's a lot of nuances, symbolism, and metaphors in each painting. And I think a lot of artists are very good at explaining what they're painting, but others, I think their language fails them. And that's where the problem comes in. But everybody knows why they're painting and what is the symbolism behind it. Like, we wanted to, when we bought 2 paintings from Meher, we wanted to talk to her about, what was she thinking? What brought her to the painting these 2 paintings? And she described in details, almost for an hour, what the symbolism behind some of the things were, like arrows, and in some places she had some flowers, some places she had some silai, stitching and all those kind of things. So she actually explained the vicissitudes of life. You know, you have challenges, you have things hurdles to cross, and how do you do that? And life is, you know, like having like a rose bush, like somebody said, or you said, that, you know, it has nice flowers, but it has thorns also. So life is like that. So I think that was the symbolism that Meher wanted to bring out.
And the work meant more to us too, once we had talked with her.
Right.
Can I just jump in and say one thing quickly? Those of us here, like Shireen has just said in a different way, but we are cultural ambassadors for Pakistan. And whether in the UK or the United States or Canada or wherever we are, there was at one point we lived in the Pakistani embassy residence here in Washington, and there we were surrounded by a lot of the old masters like Chughtai, etc. But today in my small house here in DC, my walls are full of young artists, upcoming artists, people who've appealed to me, and some people like Meher, who I do consider a master. And whether we entertain Americans or have a dinner for a visiting diplomat or whatever it is, there are many ways that we open people up outside the gallery space. And I think that is what we really need to focus on for the future.
Thank you so much. We're almost out of time. Nilfa, would you like to say something?
I think, Saqib, would you like to say something, or should we conclude?
I would like
to wrap
to
up with a few. Yeah, please.
And this is not about Meher Afroz, this is about Niloufar Farooq.
Then we can leave it out.
It is important. I think it's very important because a lot of our art is undocumented. Meher's is a case of a very big deficit of art. Sort of the critical analysis around her work. I think this is a great service that you've done. For somebody like myself who's followed Meher's work for the last 35 years, it is of extreme importance that something has been put together which comprises of views of other people and ways of looking at Meher's work. Because Meher's work is indeed so layered, like Farhanaz said, that the more you look at it, the more you are drawn to it. And every time you revisit that work, there is something more that it says to you. मुझे भी एक ज़हूर साहब का एक वो याद है कि I remember ज़िगरत में उनका शो था और मैं उनके पास गया, मैंने कहा इसका मतलब क्या है? उस वक्त fresh out of college, you know, one wanted to know the matlab of everything. At my age now, I've given up to look for matlabs. But having said that, वो मुझे कह रहे थे कि ये कोई पढ़ने की चीज है, तो मैंने कहा नहीं. He said, फिर क्यों पढ़ रहे हो? देखो सिर्फ, it's an image.
I think well said, Saqib. And, again, thank you, Saqib, for those, kind of remarks.
No,
but I must emphasize here, I should emphasize here that 15 contributors that I invited have written in this book. It is their lens that has made it so very rich. When I had the choice of either writing the book myself or inviting contributors, I felt I must have this dialogue with a group of people because I've written extensively on Meher for the last, almost 30 years. So I think as we go along with the future webinars, this too shall come into discussion, that how important it is to have this extensive dialogue on her art. Thank you, everyone. And over to you, Zara.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. We're getting a lot more questions, but I'm sorry we're out of time. Thank you to all of our panelists. This has been such a joy. I think some of this was so poetic when you're talking about instilling pride through art. The faith, loss, and water scarcity is really beautiful. And leaving things open-ended, Zishan, as you said, that is really beautiful. I'm sure we're getting a lot of comments about the book. I'm sure you're all very interested to know more about the artist. The book, A Beautiful Despair, it gives new insights into the art of Meher Afroz. As Nilufer said, there are 15 writers. And the book is launching in November. You can pre-order and avail an early bird discount. So sign up on the website, meherafrozthebook.com. So sign up. You can follow us on Facebook and Instagram. The handle is A Beautiful Despair. And our next webinar is next Friday on multiple feminisms at the intersection of tradition, history, and violence. So be sure to register. Thank you. Have a great night or a great morning and a wonderful weekend. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Zahra.
Hafiz.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Nilufer.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Hafiz, everyone. Bye.
Bye. Bye.